like I could have chosen to take him off life support. That was recommended. That was recommended.
Do you think God allows sometimes these kind of things to happen to refocus our life?
I think God allows things to happen so we can help others refocus their lives and the struggles they're going through.
Hi, my name is Tiffany. My husband was actually on life support, fractured his skull, had lots of injuries. I actually was given a choice to take him off life support or trust God, and so I trusted God.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Let's Talk About It show. This is the book author of Minutes with God and the book author for Attitude Reflecting Character. We have a miracle story we're going to be sharing with you guys today. We have Brother Cisco right here to my left and Sister Tiffany. And we're here to give hope to people that need to hear the message of how one man, not supposed to be in this chair today, how one man almost lost his life. And I know that I'm going to start with you, Sister Tiffany. You got a phone call, and a supervisor of Cisco's work told you that Cisco was in really bad shape. How bad shape was he in? And tell me a little bit of what happened, because I know this was an ICU moment. This was a near death experience, and I just want you to share a little bit about the phone call you got.
So, actually, I had called. I had not heard from Cisco all day, and that was like really rare. He usually contacts me, throughout the day, and I hadn't heard from him. It was about 1:30, and I was like, "Gosh, I haven't heard from Cisco. Let me call and see what's going on. What time he'll be home." And when I called, his boss answered the phone, and he was like, "Oh, he was in a really bad accident. He was actually taken by ambulance, and I'm not sure where they took him. So I need your help finding him." And I was like, "Wait, what?" I literally thought he was kidding. And I asked him 3 times. I was like, "If you're kidding, like, this isn't funny." And I asked him what happened, and he started to tell me, and I was like, "Well, that's a lot of detail for like somebody that's kidding."
Yeah.
So at some point I kind of like was like, "Okay, just humor him." And so when I started calling hospitals, there was a part of me that expected him to call me and be like, "What are you doing?" Because, he's a jokester like that. And so I found him in the
Every
hospital.
good husband jokes a little bit like that.
Yeah, I found him I was like, if he's joking, I'm going to kill him. So I found him in the hospital, and they had him under a trauma name.
Wow.
And
yeah.
So they were like, "Yes, he's in the trauma unit. He's here." And so when I pulled into the parking lot, like I just remember thinking like, "Okay, I've got to, what am I going to do with the kids?" All of that. And so I remember pulling into the parking lot and my phone ringing. And I think for me, I'm highly optimistic. And so I was like, "Oh, I'm sure it's fine. Like, he'll be fine." And so when my phone rang, it was Aaron from football. And I remember saying, "I don't know anything yet. I'm about to walk in." But when I hung up the phone, I just remember saying, "God, I see you." It was because I hadn't really notified anybody. So the only way she could know in my mind was like God had orchestrated that. Mm-hmm. And so immediately I just recognized that. And I went into the hospital. And when I got there, before I went into the room, I was like, "Okay, tell me what happened, prepare me." And so they started telling me, like, he hit his head when he came in. He had a Glasgow coma score of a 6. He's been intubated, and he is on the breathing machine on a vent. And so there was a part of me, I was his family, right? Like, so, but I asked the medical people, I said, "Well, should I like notify his family?" I think for me, it was like a test of like, how bad is this really? Like, their answer told me how bad it was. And so they were like, "Absolutely, call his family, and they need to get here right away." So of course, I did that, and I just I remember talking outside the door and almost like I didn't want him to hear how bad it was. Like I didn't want him to know.
Yeah.
And so, and then like friends started calling and I was like, oh my gosh. And I just felt like in that moment, like in those moments, I just saw God like rise up his army of people and like people just started surrounding me. And I think there was like a moment of denial, you know, like it took days for this to sink in. Like days.
Yeah.
And on the third day, that was on a Wednesday, on Saturday, I met with the doctor who told me they were going to do an MRI to see how bad the damage was and what we were looking at. And so during that conversation, they also told me that I needed to be thinking about how far down this road I wanted to go, and started telling me all the complications he would have and how he would never be the same, and really trying to let me know that it would be better to take him off life support. They didn't know how, like, what deficits he would have, you know, just so much, right? And I think in that moment, I just like really broke down and started crying. And I remember walking over to the window and I said, God, I need you to speak to me. I need you to speak to me, and I need you to tell me, like, I just need to know that you're here. And I couldn't, at that time, go searching in the Word, because I think, like, when you're desperate for a word, you can make anything mean something, right? And I needed to know that I knew that I knew that I knew that that was from God. And so I went over to the window, I put my head against the window, and I was crying. And for 3 days, I had people tell me, like, oh, your faith, like, you know, keep your faith. You're so strong in your faith. And so this guy walks off the unit, and he says, don't lose your faith, sister. And, like, I didn't know this guy from Adam. I mean, he literally said that to me. And then he pulls out his Bible, which was, like, a life recovery Bible. How crazy, right?
How ironic is that, right?
Yeah. So, and he says, hold on, God's got a word for you. And he opens his Bible, and he's like, there was a scripture of hope, and it was like Zechariah. And so I was like, okay, Lord, I hear you. And here's the interesting part, right? The interesting part was God said, don't lose your faith.
Right.
Like, so stand firm. Like, hey, don't stop believing what you're believing for because this guy said this. And a couple of days prior to this, I had called to cancel my calendar. And I had somebody tell me, Tiffany, God's working miracles. And our God is a miracle working God. And I'm believing for a miracle for you. And so that was the first word. Like, I saw him in the parking lot, then I see him rising up his army, and then there's this word of miracles that comes to me, and then don't lose your faith, right? So I'm like, okay, Lord, like, I'm believing you for a miracle. So I go home that night, and I'm crying, and I'm, like, really crying out to God, and I see a vision, basically, of, like, me doing his funeral, and then I saw him, like, in the hospital bed, unable to move. And then I saw him in a wheelchair. And then I saw him standing up with his right side, like, not working right, but he was up and walking around. And I felt like God said to me, like, what do you want to line yourself up with? So, like, each of them had an outcome, right? Like, I could have chosen to take him off life support. That was recommended. And I was like, God, I just want what you want. Like, I just want to know that whatever it is, that, like, you're in it. And if I come believing, I'm believing for the whole thing. I'm not going to believe for him to be laid up in a nursing home, unable to talk, unable to move. Like, I'm believing for the whole thing.
Amen.
And so, so I was like, that's what I'm lining myself up with. I'm lining myself up with complete healing. And I remember, I woke my mom up. My mom was there, and I woke her up, and she goes, I said, I feel like God spoke to me. He said, he's bringing Cisco home, and there's going to be healing. And she looked at me, and she says, honey, maybe you should go back and ask God to clarify what home means. So, nothing like a little seated down there, right? Like, so, I mean, but that's how the enemy works. So here comes this, like, well, yeah, okay, like, God, could you clarify? But I didn't need that because I already felt like I knew.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I'm not going to say that there was not doubt in the midst of like, are you sure? You know, that's a really big belief. Like, are you sure?
You speaking? You're good.
And so in that process, okay, that was Saturday. So Tuesday we go back into the hospital and we sit down with the same doctor. Okay, so this doctor's mom was a God-fearing woman, because he shared that with me, so I knew. So his mom was a God-fearing woman, and he had told me, like, I don't know if that was me, like, I would want them to take me off life support, right? Yeah. So he was, you know, definitely letting me know what his opinion was. And so anyway, we go back into the room, and he tells me he does have a DAI grade 2 injury. He has axonal shearing in his brain. So we were talking about, are we going to take him off life support? Are we going to do the trait and keep him on life support and give him some time to see and what are our options here, right? And so I was like, look, I appreciate you and I'm so thankful for you, but you didn't ask me before you put him on life support. Like, you took medicine and you took it into your own hands, and this is what you chose. And I just don't see anything wrong with like walking out that decision and doing the next reasonable step in care, which was putting the trach and getting them stabilized. And let's just give it some time. And so we actually, I had come up with pretty much a time frame of 6 weeks. That's like what kept coming to me was 6 weeks. And so he had gotten another doctor on the phone, and like we all kind of counseled, and then it was like all of a sudden we were in agreement that we needed to move forward with this. And I'm not even kidding. Like, the next day that doctor came in and he had so much resolve. Like, I'm still like, are we doing the right thing? And he's like, we're moving forward. This is a 43-year-old man. He's got kids. He coaches football. Like, he's got a life. We're throwing the kitchen sink at him. We're moving forward. And I was like, okay, we're moving forward, you know? And then, of course, his staff, the nurses, were like, have you lost your mind? Right? And so,
so crazy.
The one nurse says to me, he says, ma'am, you need to talk to neuro. Like, you need to get them down here right now. Like, they need to talk to you. His prognosis is not good, ma'am. And I said, sir, I appreciate you, but if I was meant to talk to neuro, they would have been here 2 days ago. They haven't come. And he said, we're going to fix that. I'm going to get them on the phone. Okay. So neuro never came. So, like, that was like, they didn't come until the day he was being transferred to the other hospital. So there was a lot that happened between then and his discharge. But I will say that when we got him to the other hospital, I went in, I toured the hospital, and I was like, this looks like a place where miracles can occur. And so, and the staff was like, yeah. And so there was times, you know, that we met with the staff. I met with the staff, and I was like, do you think I'm just being hopefully, like, optimistic? Like, am I in denial here? I mean, definitely those times. And I kind of equate that to, just equate it to Peter in the boat. Like, you know, he's walking on water, and I felt like I had like this heart and a mind full of faith and a mind and a heart full of scripture, and I went in every day, and I would get there, and some days there were like no changes. Some days it was just hard, you know, and I was like, God, are we ever going to move past that? And there were days that I drove home in tears, like just crying, thinking, I just don't see how we're ever going to move past this. Like, this is going to be a long road. And I remember asking God, like, God, I need a strategy. What's the strategy? Like, I need something that I can praise you for every day. And in business, I've just learned, like, what you focus on expands. Like, so, like, when you celebrate, when you praise, when you are focused on, like, what God's doing, it's like it takes your eyes off of the things that he's not. And so I felt like that was what God gave me, was like, I said, God, give me one thing I can praise you for, and then the rest will be my strategy. And so that's what I did. Like, I just went to Facebook and I'm like, okay, praise report for the day, and this is what
I
we
saw that. I was encouraged by those too. Yeah, those is amazing. Like, because it really was a life or death situation. So I'm going to comment on this, and then I'm going to pass this over to Cisco. So just to recap a little bit, we have Cisco on life support. He's unsure of what's going on, and he's doing life support, and he's fighting for his life unconsciously. But now you're in a position where you're advocating for his life. So there's two battles going on. Him fighting for his life unconsciously, you advocating for his life. And right now this is so powerful because now you're the person that says keep him on life support or take him off of life support. And you chose faith and to say, you know, my God's big enough. And so the doctors were planting doubt. Some of them were planting doubt in your head, saying, you know, this might be the better option. And then you had going back to Scripture, like, you know, God, I think you're the better option, and you're being patient. And so that's powerful. That speaks volume about you. And now you. So when you guys get into a fight now you got to be like, remember, I saved your life, right?
That's her advantage.
I have the power.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit. Now you woke up, and I mean, what's going on in your head? Talk to me about what you
right now.
understood.
I'm still working the kinks and errors I still have. As far as my shoulder, my right shoulder is still broken. I'm still trying to recover mentally. Physically, I feel like I'm okay, but there's some borders there that hold me back. I get nervous. I'm worried about, is my head okay? You know, I deal with my kids more than I do myself because I'd rather enjoy them at this time. You know, and my wife too. You know, I'm there for her now. I'm grateful to her for not pulling the plug on me.
Yeah.
You know, having faith in God. And I remember being in the hospital. God said, just lie on your wife. Lay on your wife. Believe in her, and I'm a guider. And here I am. I'm coaching football, youth football again.
Yeah.
You know, trying to help out wherever I can.
Yeah. So when you woke up from the hospital, what did you understand? What did they tell you?
They said I was in an accident, and I don't remember nothing of the accident. I remember going through the situation of falling because I work construction. Okay. And I was always careful. Even though I was clumsy, I was always careful with, you know, the big equipment.
Sure.
And I just felt like maybe I got set up. I don't know what happened. But, you know, I can't say it was this person's fault, but my own.
Thoughts.
I just know that I fell. And I had a hard head, and so I'm like thinking, how did I bust my head? How did I break my back? How did I break my shoulder? How did I break my ribs? And it didn't make sense to me. So I tried to get up. I couldn't walk. I couldn't talk. I couldn't even eat. I don't remember, like I said, I don't remember the hospital. I remember when I was released June 30th. I remember everything from there.
Wow.
And, you know, I just been faithful to God now, praying to Him and just keeping up with Him and what He wants me to do.
So what kind of equipment did you fall off of?
I was they say it was a small ladder.
Okay.
So it doesn't make sense to me that
was there a video or anything?
No, nobody. My old boss has video, but other than that, he has pictures of me falling. But other than that, I don't have nothing. Everyone said that they tried to save my life, try to get me breathing again, and they couldn't do it.
Wow.
So it was tough because I'm, like I said, I work construction.
Right.
You know, you're gonna have accidents. You're gonna nail your finger one day. You know, hit a board one day, but never nothing this drastic. Yeah. I just didn't think. I know I had the capability of being careful not to go through this.
Right.
And I used to see people get hurt all the time, and I was like, that's not gonna be me. And apparently God said, I'm gonna do something in you. You know, and He did it.
Do you think God allows sometimes these kind of things to happen to refocus our life?
I think God allows things to happen so we can help others refocus their lives and the struggles that they're going through. You know, I was a man of God. You know, I have a calling that He gave to me a while back, and I just haven't done it.
Yeah.
But I think this was the time where he said, it's time to do it.
Yeah.
And so once I get better, I'm going to follow his word and go to what he wants me to do. Because you never know. I could, like my wife said, they weren't giving me life. They said, I'm done.
Yeah.
I don't remember none of it. I don't. And I used to tell doctors they're crazy for saying that. I didn't even want to talk to the doctors. I just wanted to come home to my kids and my wife, you know, and it was a struggle. It still is a struggle, but I know with faith that God will doctor move mountains.
I think because when he woke up, he didn't even know, like, he was trying to convince me he was okay to go home, but I had been there the whole time.
There's
so
lots
I
of
knew.
process.
Like, no, you're not okay to go home. So he was like, no, like, let's go. And so I think, like, the therapists would come in and try to talk to him, and they would be like, oh, that's your head injury. And he would get mad because he was like, see, there's nothing wrong with my brain. Like, he literally didn't think there was anything wrong.
Yeah.
And then, so it was like learning to walk. I think when they set him up, he couldn't even sit up at first. Like, we have videos where he couldn't sit up, couldn't move his legs. He wasn't able originally to move his arms. Like, I felt like while he laid there, I was afraid that he would lose mobility. And so I started doing range of motion on his arms and his legs. And like within a couple days, he would start moving them. But it wasn't in such a way that they considered that to be controlled movement. They were like, oh, no, that's on accident, right? But I knew better, you know? So I think...
So doctors were telling you that his movement was on accident. And I think this is the whole battle with Christianity is that, reason tells us that, like on the scientific field, like, hey, this kind of movement's on accident. But going back to scripture, we know that God can do anything, right? And so how was that battle for you? Like, I mean, you're dealing with this doubt of doctors telling you that this isn't working out, and then how are you dealing with that at this point?
I think for me, my biggest fear for him was that he would open his eyes one day and that he would ask me why you did this to me. Like, maybe like we would get stuck in a phase, like maybe we would get stuck at a place where he wouldn't be able to move his arms or his legs. And we were stuck in that phase for a week and a half, 2 weeks, whatever it was. And I was like, okay, God, like his eyes are open and he's, I think in there, like, but is this where we're stopping, right? Like, is this it? And for me, I think that was my biggest fear is like not bringing him home and having him stuck in a hospital or a nursing home, and him looking at me one day and questioning and wondering like why you didn't just move up, right? Like that for me was, I think, the hardest part, and that's like what would choke me up. And my kids too, like we've got kids, and that was one of the things I told the doctors. I was like, hey, like if he's on the sidelines in a wheelchair and his kids have a dad, like, is it worth it? At what point do we get to decide that life isn't worth it? Is it like, hey, he's in a wheelchair, but he's on the sidelines and he's, with it enough to know he loves his kids. And I think that the scary thing, the part about head injuries is there is no rule book, right? And so that's why I want to be very clear about this. That's why this is so important to me, because we are somebody's survival guide. This story is going to be somebody else's survival guide. And they're going to look, just like there was a book that was sent to me, and I leaned on it. And I was like, God, if you could do this for them, you could do this for me. Mm-hmm. So it was like, I know you're no respecter of persons. Like, I know. And God had already told me to position myself to receive. Wow, he told me that. Yeah. And like before, he said, stop begging. Position yourself to receive. And I was like, okay, like, let's do it. But then I'm human,
Yeah,
you
you
know?
still get the human.
Yeah, like,
yeah.
I'm human, and so when I'm seeing them set him up in the bed, and he's like not able to sit up on his own, and he's like so groggy and like out of it looking, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's scary. Yeah, so I think there was times like they set him up for therapy one day, and I left. I was like, I gotta go. I left, and I drove home crying. I cried like all day. And there were people, I was really careful too about the people that I called on during those times, because I wanted people that had the ability to sing my heart back to me, right? So like the words that I spoke and the things that I stood on when I wavered and I fell, they were like, no, girl, no, you said this, God said this, I'm believing it with you, like, and sing that back to me. That was super important.
Yeah. Question for Cisco. How do you feel this tragedy has brought you and your family closer to God?
It's brought us a lot closer to God. One of the things I did when I got my phone back, when she said I could have my phone back, I started listening to the song by Hillsong United Oceans.
Okay.
Help me to walk on deep waters. Help me to put my feet stable. And I was scared to walk. I didn't know how to walk at that time. And then I just leaned on it, and I was able to walk. No walker, no wheelchair. And ever since then, I'm just so faithful to God, because I feel like He's brought me closer to Him. I was already close to God, but there was still a doubt in me, thinking, is this really God? Is this my life? Am I creating this? Or is there really a God? And now I know there is a God, because I shouldn't even be here.
Right.
I shouldn't be playing football with my kids. Like I said, I coach youth football, and all those kids that I coach love on me. When I came back and they saw me, they all gave me a hug. They were there for me. So it's been different. It's been a life-changing experience.
Yeah. Amen. Any good questions you guys want to be asked?
I just want people to have faith that there is an answer from God. As long as they believe in God and feel like there is a God, they'll get the answers that they need.
I think too. I think sometimes this is a hard topic, right?
Right, it is.
Because there's a lot of people who haven't had this outcome. And I think it's like important to kind of touch on that, because it's like, just because God didn't show up in that situation, like, does that mean He was less there? Does that mean that He loved them less? You know what I'm saying? Like, because I feel like the outcome could have went the other way.
Right.
And
so we have this amazing story, and we're told in the Bible that life and death is in the power of the tongue. And this could have turned into a whole nother story. Had God not been present, had wisdom not been present, how certain things not have been present, this could have gone a whole nother way. And so, what do you think would have killed your faith during that time? We'll start with you.
I think not being able to come back and be where I'm at now, not having my life back, not being with my kids, probably would have been the deepest regret I would have had in life. Because work comes and goes. Things will get better, but your family will never get better. And just what they went through when my kids saw me there, I remember them telling me they used to come and see me, but I didn't want them to see me that way. Not to remember their dad the way he was struggling, and just seeing my wife sometimes cry when I was there. And every time she talked to me and I was during physical therapy, I would look at her and say, yes, I'm accomplishing my goal, making her happy, making her laugh. Just the togetherness that God brings through this is amazing. And I think it'll work for anybody that believes in God, that has faith in God. Even if you might not know God, but somebody's out there watching over you. And His name is Jesus,
Let me see real quick one more thing. Okay, so you guys spoke life into the situation. You guys walked in the counsel of God. You guys said, "Hey, you know what? We're gonna go through this." And the recovery process, especially you, Tiff, because you were in that. He was unconscious. You were in that corner where you were just like, "What do I do?" So amazing story.
And he got to sleep through the whole thing.
You got to sleep through the whole thing.
I had a good nap.
You got a good nap. Woke up sore.
Yeah.
So you guys had some major tragedies in your life, and Christians, I don't know if Christians understand that tragedies do come, tragedies do happen. We always want to talk about joyful moments. We always want to talk about positive moments, and we always most definitely want to give praise in those kind of moments, because those are memories that we want to have in life. We don't want to talk about the negative, but there's also purpose in the negative. There's also growth in the negative. There's also some really good things that some opportune moments that can happen even in negative situations. And so, like for example, you were telling me that your son was a miracle child too, with a heart and everything, and now your husband, and like you guys have learned to put God first in the midst of tragedy. And I think the devil hates your guys' guts for that. I think the devil wants to hurt you all the more because of that. And I think you're this huge target because now you're giving God praise in the midst of where God pulled you out of. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So I think the cool part about that is that I didn't have to praise. Like, yes, I'm praising, but this happened and unfolded before like so many people, right? Like, when I went on Facebook and like posted, like, there were so many people that shared his story and his experience. I had people that had signed up, like, hey, I put you guys on a prayer chain, and you're a part of my mother's church, and they're praying for you. And so when I posted videos of him like walking, they stole the videos and not stole them, but you know what I mean. They like stole the videos and like shared them with like the people. So it was like, you know, so much of it was, look at what you are praying for, like look at what God has done, and they got to see it firsthand with us, right? Like with me, right? But I will say that when this did happen, I had reached out to a prayer warrior that like did know us with the heart, you know, situation, and reached out to our pastor, and he was like, oh my gosh, you guys. And the prayer warrior told me, she said, Tiffany, I just feel like this is like your call. She goes, I think this for you, because it's like going to the cross. And one of the things that I learned with Noah was that
Noah's your son.
Noah's my son, my heart baby. Is that people say really crazy things when you're in the midst of difficulty. And so when we found out that Noah had half a heart, we had people that were like, I started making plans to go to the Ronald McDonald House. Like we were going to, I was giving birth. You were not. I was. Well, I was going to say we were giving birth, but I gave birth. So as soon as I delivered, they took Noah and gave him, you know, put him on machines, and like he had his first heart surgery at 15 days old. So what God told me in that though was I had started praying, and I said, Lord, like I just need a word. Just tell me what I'm doing, right? And God spoke to my heart, and he said, sometimes you have to go through things. And that's the thing. People don't want to go through things. We want to skip the miracle and go straight to the mountaintop, right? And we don't want to go through the process. And, you know, I'm a big believer, like, there's people out there that might disagree, but I don't feel like Jesus wanted to go to the cross. He went out into the desert, and he prayed, he sweat blood, and he asked God if there's any way to take this from him, right? Like, can we do this another way? Like, I mean, that's the human, right? Like, I see that, like, as us being human, right? Just, I think sometimes we read the Bible and we're like, yeah, that's a great story. And we know the end. But, like, when you think about people walking that out, like, Cain killed Abel. Like, Eve, as a mom, how would you feel, like, if one of your kids killed the other kid, right? Like, as a mom. And so when you put the emotional human aspect to that, it's like, man, like I just, back to Jesus and the cross, like he didn't want to, but he was like, God, if this is your will, I go, and I go for the sake of all of these people, right? And that's huge. And I think about that in the way of miracles. Like, I remember being out on the streets ministering to people, and this guy asked me, he's like, don't you want to see a miracle? I'm like, on other people's lives. Like, wow. I don't want the miracle. I know that's awful. But I'm like, God, because I know what you got to go through to get the miracle. I don't want to go through that. Nobody wants to go through this, but when you're in it, you get to decide how you're going to go through it. Right? And I get to decide to the best of my ability and with the strength of God, like how I show up in that situation. And so am I going to show up weak and defeated from the gate, or am I going to show up with victory and knowing that, regardless of the situation, we have victory, right? Like, even if it had turned out different, it's
a tough topic. It's a tough situation. It's a tough topic, and wow, it's an amazing situation, the outcome. So I want to ask you one last question, the both of you guys, and I'll put you guys kind of on the spot. So again, life and death is in the power of the tongue, is what the Bible tells us. What would you say to Christians that speak some form of doubt in situations like this? Because I don't think that every Christian's mature enough to speak life into situations like this. I think every Christian's kind of like, you know what I mean? They know little pieces, but they don't know the whole story, and obviously they're not in the situation. They're talking about things from an outside perspective. But when you're in the fire, what are some things that you didn't want to hear, or you don't think should have been said when people are in the fire? What are some things, some cautions?
I think for me, when I was in the fire, I didn't want to hear people say, well, this is God's will. God's going to take care of you. I didn't want to hear that. I just wanted people to say, get up and let's go. I even had I asked somebody, can you get me out of here? He said, I'm going to put you in the Jeep. If we get pulled over, just hide in the back.
Don't make no noise.
He's breaking out.
So, you have to have faith. You have to believe that you're in it for a reason. And it's to help yourself and to help those around you, in my opinion.
So actually, that's what I didn't want to hear. So someone actually said to me, yeah, but so in the beginning, I remember I was like, the devil he knocked on the wrong door. Like, this is what we do. Like, this is what I do. Like, I was a born fighter, right? I just fight differently now. Like, I fight in the spirit. I don't fight with my fist, but I was born, like, just fighting battles. And I think that was something I had to overcome, because it doesn't always have to be hard, right? And like learning, like, hey, not everything has to be hard. But one of the things that I didn't want to hear was, if you had enough faith, ... right? Like,
talk about it.
As if he was to die, it like meant I didn't have enough faith, or like, if I had enough faith, we wouldn't have had to go through the situation with Noah, like, as if my faith hinged on
like if your faith was on trial.
Yeah. And I don't think that has anything to do with it, right? I think that what's important is if you go to God and you get the word from God about your situation. God had already spoken to my heart and said, you have to go through this. So I already knew to take preparation. Like, I already knew to make the plans that I was making for my son, even though people in the church were saying, if you had enough faith, you wouldn't even be doing that. You would just be praying over the situation, right? So that was one thing. The other one was also, you're going through this for other people. And I was like, I don't want to go through this at all. Like, I don't want to go through this at all. And there was a minute where even though I knew that was true, and I didn't want to go through it, I also had to get myself positioned to go through it, right? Like, you're going through it. Like I said, you're going through it whether you want to or not, because this is what it is. The situation's here. It's knocked on your door, and you're going through it. So you get to decide. You know what I mean? And so I had to get my mind around that and say, okay. And here's the thing I got in the Word, and I got the Word for me. And during that time, because it was super public, you do think, like, God, what if this is the one time you don't show up for me? What if this is, like, the one time that...
Stay there, baby.
Stay. What if this is the one time you don't show up for me and you leave me and my family? Like, what if this is, you know, here I'm confessing and I'm believing. And so that was like the biggest thing for me. And I felt like it was not my responsibility. The Lord and the Word says that those that put their trust and belief in Him will not be put to shame. And that was the one thing I stood on, was like, God, you said that if I put my hope and trust in you, like, you will not put me to shame.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is such a good scripture for somebody to hang on to, and somebody to, yeah. So we'll close it there. I just want to thank you guys for your time, brother. You're a miracle.
Thank you.
Sister Tiffany, you spoke volumes, and especially in the situation you were in. Again, we're talking about a man who was on life support. He took a long nap, and his wife had to take charge and had to make some tough decisions. What would you do, right? What would you want to hear? What, you know what I mean? Would you lean on the doctor's perspective, or would you lean on God's perspective? These are very tough issues, but you learn a few things from what people have gone through experience. So thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.